Welcome to Biden Brief. The content of the briefing includes: U.S. failed to track $1 billion in Ukraine military aid, watchdog says. U.S.-led coalition strikes Iran-aligned Houthi militants in Yemen. U.S. missiles strike targets in Yemen linked to the Houthi militia. Lagarde warns that Trump represents a threat to Europe. Chris Christie's gift to Nikki Haley. U.S. failed to track $1 billion in Ukraine military aid, watchdog says. Washington Post. The Pentagon's Inspector General has found that the Defense Department has failed to properly keep track of over $1 billion worth of sensitive equipment, including missiles and drones, provided to Ukraine to fight against Russia. The report raises questions about the U.S. ability to prevent the theft of its weapons. The timing of the report is unfortunate for the Biden administration, as it is urging Congress to approve additional military support for Ukraine. The report does not conclude that aid has been diverted, and the Pentagon and State Department have responded that they are confident that U.S. support for Ukraine is being used appropriately. The report suggests that U.S. officials have struggled to meet requirements for closer accountability and tracking of sensitive military items provided to Ukraine. The report examined $1.7 billion of weapons and equipment since 2014, finding that over half was not properly accounted for. Some items, such as radio equipment and night vision goggles, are small enough to smuggle and sell on the black market, and others, such as shoulder-fired missiles, are sought after globally. The report found that officials struggled to enter the serial numbers of weaponry and equipment into a Pentagon tracking database. U.S.-led coalition strikes Iran-aligned Houthi militants in Yemen. Washington Post. The U.S., led by the Biden administration, has launched airstrikes against Iran-supported Houthi insurgents in Yemen, in response to ongoing attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea. The attacks by the Houthi group have disrupted global trade by making the area a dangerous place for shipping. U.S. officials have blamed Iran for having aided and abetted the crisis, saying the Houthis would be unable to threaten the shipping route without Tehran's support. The strikes will raise tensions in the region, which has seen an increase in violence since Hamas carried out an attack on Israel in October. U.S. missiles strike targets in Yemen linked to the Houthi militia. New York Times. The United States and a handful of its allies carried out military strikes against more than a dozen targets in Yemen controlled by the Iranian-backed Houthi militia, U.S. officials said, in an expansion of the war in the Middle East that the Biden administration had sought to avoid for 3 months. The American-led air and naval strikes came in response to more than 24 Houthi drone and missile attacks against commercial shipping in the Red Sea since November, and after warnings to the Houthis in the past week from the Biden administration and several international allies of serious consequences if the salvos did not stop. The Houthis defied that ultimatum, vowing to continue their attacks in what they say is a protest against Israel's military campaign in Gaza. The Allied strikes hit radars, missiles and drone launch sites, and weapons storage areas. It was unclear whether the strikes would deter the Houthis from continuing their attacks, which have forced some of the world's largest shipping companies to reroute vessels away from the Red Sea, creating delays and extra costs felt around the world through higher prices for oil and other imported goods. Lagarde warns that Trump represents a threat to Europe. Financial Times. Christine Lagarde, president of the European Central Bank, ECB, has stated that a second term for Donald Trump as president of the U.S. would be clearly a threat to Europe. Lagarde cited areas such as trade protectionism, military support for NATO, and the fight against climate change as potential points of conflict between the U.S. and Europe. She also dismissed rumors that she might leave the ECB to rejoin politics, stating that she would not leave the institution in the middle of the battle against inflation. Chris Christie's gift to Nikki Haley. Washington Post. As Chris Christie drops out of the GOP race, the Trump campaign has tried to argue that it won't benefit Nikki Haley. However, there is evidence to suggest that many of Christie's supporters could vote for Haley instead. An earlier CNN poll had shown that a third of Christie supporters listed Haley as their second choice. Moreover, a Suffolk University poll in Iowa showed that Haley gained the most in a race without Christie. The Trump campaign's argument is also weak, as its own polling data shows that Trump's leads over Haley are not overwhelming. Hunter Biden, son of U.S. President, pleads not guilty to tax charges. ABC. Hunter Biden, the son of U.S. President Joe Biden, has pleaded not guilty to 9 tax charges in a federal court. The charges relate to unpaid taxes totaling $1.4 million between 2016 and 2019. Prosecutors accuse Biden of using the money to fund an extravagant lifestyle. Biden's lawyer claims that his client has already paid back the taxes and is being persecuted due to his famous last name. Biden also faces charges in a separate federal case in Delaware related to lying about his illegal drug use when buying a gun. Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives are pushing to hold him in contempt of Congress for refusing to testify in their impeachment inquiry of his father. Hertz will sell electric cars after being burned by Tesla's price cuts. New York Times. Rental car company Hertz plans to sell around 1/3 of the electric vehicles, EVs, in its fleet, citing rapid depreciation and high repair costs as reasons for the decision. Hertz said the EVs were also more likely to be involved in accidents. The move has led to criticism from some Republicans, who argue that the decision proves EVs are costly and unpopular. Hertz said it still plans to electrify its fleet and buy more EVs, but that the market needs further development. World seeks a very different sort of U.S. leadership from what's on offer. South China Morning Post. The Gaza conflict has damaged the moral authority of the U.S., and the world needs an America that is willing to uphold its founding principles and work with others to create a more equitable global order. The U.S. government has promised unwavering support for Taiwan and the Philippines in their challenges with China, but proxy conflicts and the use of force to contain adversaries is a dangerous and risky strategy. The escalating tensions in the region echo President Biden's warning about the threat rising authoritarianism poses for democracies around the world, but global sentiment no longer resonates with the U.S. assertion of moral superiority. Fact check: Donald Trump repeats false claims about his legal troubles after closing arguments in civil trial. CNN. Donald Trump has accused President Joe Biden of personally initiating the civil and criminal cases that he is now facing, a claim that is factually incorrect. The New York case was initiated by state investigators and has nothing to do with Biden. Trump also claimed that the fraud law he is accused of violating has never been used before, which is also false. The law has been used in previous cases, including one against Trump University. U.S. Middle East policy has failed. Foreign policy. The conflict between Israel and Hamas has brought the Gaza Strip to the edge of annihilation, and the Middle East to the brink of a wider war. The United States' response has been to throw money, weapons, and military assets at the region, believing that an Israel-Saudi normalization deal centered on U.S. security guarantees is the key to achieving lasting peace and prosperity. However, this approach is bound to backfire. Israel and Saudi Arabia, the U.S.'s main regional partners, are liabilities rather than assets, consistently undermining U.S. interests and values. Washington should fundamentally change its approach to both countries, moving from unconditional support to arm's-length relationships. Israel's war in Gaza epitomizes the violence done to stated U.S. values while also jeopardizing U.S. interests in the Middle East. The destruction wreaked by this war will take generations to fix, and Washington's global image has been permanently tarnished by its support for such actions. The conflict could escalate into a broader regional conflict with direct U.S. involvement, as skirmishes between Israel and Hezbollah escalate and Iranian proxies carry out attacks on U.S. military personnel. Washington appears either unable or unwilling to leverage its special relationship with Israel or hold Benjamin Netanyahu responsible. Saudi Arabia is one of the most autocratic states in the world, committing widespread human rights abuses at home and supporting autocracies throughout the region. The Saudi-led military intervention in Yemen has produced the world's worst humanitarian crisis and caused over 377,000 deaths. Riyadh is connected to nearly every conflict zone and geopolitical fault line in the Middle East. U.S. support for Israel and Saudi Arabia has emboldened them to pursue reckless policies, knowing that the U.S. will come to their aid. The Biden administration's efforts to broker normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel are likely to backfire and should be abandoned. A fundamental reorientation of U.S. Middle East policy is necessary to end complicity in its partners' policies and reorient U.S. interests in the region. Blinken talks a grand vision for Mideast peace, but hits a wall in Israel. New York Times. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has expressed confidence in the support he received from Middle Eastern leaders for a vision of post-war Gaza, which would include a Palestinian state alongside Israel. However, the Israeli government has not shown any alignment with the Biden administration's long-term goals. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his aides are focused on the war in Gaza against Hamas and are dismissive of the creation of a Palestinian state. While Blinken believes now is the moment to forge a political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Israeli officials prioritize stability and security. Tech innovations that caught our eye at CES 2024. Associated Press. The CES 2024 Tech Show in Las Vegas showcased a range of innovations aimed at solving real-world problems and making life more fun. Some notable innovations included assistive technologies for the disabled, such as Eurogear's hand-stabilizing glove for Parkinson's patients, and Wisp's audio-to-audio-based AI for people with vocal impairments. The show also highlighted advancements in inter-device connectivity, with companies like Samsung and Google integrating their smart home devices, and Mercedes-Benz unveiling an AI-powered virtual assistant for cars. Additionally, there were numerous electric vehicles, hydrogen engines, and mobility advances on display, as well as high-tech kitchen gadgets and transparent TVs. Sununu says he would vote for Trump if he's the nominee, even if he's a convicted felon. CNN. New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who has endorsed Nikki Haley for the 2024 Republican primary, has said he would vote for Donald Trump if he becomes the GOP nominee, even if he is a convicted felon. Sununu stated, "Right now, most of America looks like they would vote for him because he is winning. I am going to support the Republican nominee, absolutely." He also criticized President Joe Biden, saying, "Make no mistake about it, Biden is that bad of a president that even Trump would win." Sununu's comments came on the same day that former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie ended his 2024 campaign, and said he would not back anyone who does not call out Trump as unfit to be president. Tesla is raising factory worker pay as auto union tries to organize its electric vehicle plants. Associated Press. Tesla has informed its factory workers in the U.S. that they can expect pay raises this year. The United Auto Workers, UAW, union has said that Tesla workers have informed them of the pay raises, although no details have been given about the size of the increases. The UAW is aiming to organize all non-union auto plants in the U.S., including Tesla's assembly and battery factories in California, Nevada, and Texas. Conservative jurists and the health risks they expect women to endure. Washington Post opinion. The U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to hear an abortion case from Idaho, deciding whether the state's stringent abortion law, which provides exceptions only when necessary to save the mother's life, must give way to a federal law requiring hospitals to provide stabilizing treatment for patients facing emergency medical conditions. The court also issued an order preventing the federal government from enforcing emergency access to abortions in the meantime, raising concerns about women's access to health care and their right to bodily autonomy. DeSantis, Haley back ethanol to appeal to Iowa farmers. Bloomberg. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis supports year-round sales of E15 gasoline. The E15 fuel blend contains 15% corn-based ethanol and is generally barred from sale in much of the U.S. during summer months. DeSantis called those restrictions arbitrary. The governor also voiced his opposition to California's Proposition 12 rule, which has raised pork prices for consumers in California and costs for hog farmers. DeSantis also vowed to rein in the Environmental Protection Agency. Why Biden gets little credit for a strong U.S. economy. Financial Times. The U.S. economy has outperformed its international peers over the past year, thanks in part to the Biden administration's post-pandemic stimulus measures. However, President Joe Biden has seen little improvement in voter sentiment, with his job approval rating at just 39%. One key issue is inflation, as most Americans do not feel better off despite positive macroeconomic data. Biden officials are hoping for continued improvement in the economy, but political polarization and social media disinformation are affecting voters' sentiment. Other factors, such as concerns about Biden's age and Vice President Kamala Harris's lack of political appeal, are also hindering his popularity. Swatting incident bomb threat called to judge overseeing Trump trial. The Sydney Morning Herald. U.S. President Donald Trump has claimed that his myriad legal troubles, including the current civil fraud trial, are politically motivated and set up by President Joe Biden. The former president is seeking to maintain his innocence in the $370 million trial, which centers on allegations that he lied about his family business and inflated property values for financial gain. Trump was granted a brief opportunity to make remarks during closing arguments, but used the time to attack Attorney General Letitia James and the trial judge, Arthur Engoron. China will pay the price for war, says lone radioman monitoring conflict from his car. Telegraph. Robin Su, a former naval radar operator, has been documenting the Chinese military's growing aggression towards Taiwan for the past 3 years. He records interactions between Chinese, Taiwanese and U.S. jets and posts the results on Facebook, aiming to raise awareness of the threat from Beijing. China's increasing military and political pressure on Taiwan forms the backdrop of the country's presidential and parliamentary elections. The new president will be tasked with maintaining peace and stability in one of the world's biggest potential flashpoints, and their leadership will set the tone for Taipei's ties with Beijing, and have profound consequences for China's relationship with the U.S. China's Communist Party has been accused of trying to manipulate and shape the elections to favor its sovereignty claims. China has repeatedly flown military aircraft into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, next to its territorial airspace, in an attempt to psychologically intimidate the Taiwanese public and undermine the government. Hey there, folks. It's your friendly neighborhood Dr. 6 reporting from the 6 Degrees world. I'm here to bring you the latest news, analysis, and a dash of humor to brighten your day. So let's dive right in. First up, it seems like the US has misplaced a whopping $1 billion worth of military equipment in Ukraine. Whoops. The timing couldn't be worse for the Biden administration, as they're asking Congress for more military support. Hopefully, they can find those missiles and drones before they end up in the wrong hands. Maybe they should check under the couch cushions. Speaking of military actions, the US-led coalition has launched airstrikes against Iran-backed Houthi militants in Yemen. It seems the Houthi group has been disrupting global trade, and the US is not happy about it. But let's hope these strikes don't escalate tensions in the already volatile region. We don't need any more fireworks, thank you very much. In other news, Christine Lagarde, the president of the European Central Bank, has warned that a second term for Donald Trump would be clearly a threat to Europe. I guess she's not a fan of trade protectionism and climate change denial. Can't say I blame her. But let's see if Trump decides to make a comeback and prove her wrong. Stranger things have happened. On the home front, Hunter Biden, son of President Joe Biden, is facing some tax charges. He's pleaded not guilty, claiming he's being persecuted because of his famous last name. Ah, the perks of being a Biden. Let's hope this doesn't turn into another political circus. We've had enough of those, haven't we? And finally, it looks like Hertz is selling off some of its electric vehicles. Apparently, they're not as popular as they thought. But hey, they're still planning to electrify their fleet, so it's not all bad news for the EV industry. Maybe they just need a little more time to charge up. Well, folks, that's all the news I have for you today. Remember, these are just my observations and opinions. I'd love to hear what you think about these stories. Do you have any thoughts on the missing military equipment in Ukraine, or the US airstrikes in Yemen? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay tuned to 6 Degrees. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6 Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6 team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6 Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6 Brief via email,